Welcome, everyone. Once again, this is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. And today it's my pleasure to introduce a new ISSIP ambassador of 2022, a colleague from New York University, Hila Lifshitz-Assaf. And we met at an augmented intelligence mini conference online that AIS was running. And Hila, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. The community would love to learn about your work and your research and a little bit about you. And then I'll have one other question for you. So Hila, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Hila Lifshitz-Assaf. I'm a professor at NYU and I'm affiliate faculty at the Harvard Lish, the Lab for Innovation Science. So I see myself as a innovation scholar, innovation researcher. I've been researching, studying, teaching innovation for a while, and especially new ways of organizing for innovation. What has the digital age basically changed about the way we organize for knowledge work and innovation? So I study phenomena such as crowdsourcing, open source, AI, hackathons, 3D printing, all kind of interesting new technologies and how they change the way we basically innovate.
And I think, as I recall, and I've read a few of your papers, you have some very interesting work that's going on right now, looking at how artificial intelligence can augment the capability of teams. And I believe you've also studied just teams of people. So, you know, how much does crowdsourcing boost the intelligence of a team? How much does a team working with AI boost the intelligence? And your findings on AI were, I thought, quite elegant in the sense that you looked at how engaged the people were with the AI. And I think you found if they weren't engaged, it didn't have much of an effect. But if they were engaged, there were some interesting ways that an AI system could boost the intelligence of groups. Could you tell us a little bit about that work?
Definitely. So this is an in-depth study led by Sarah Leibovich, who's now at UVA, myself, and Natalia Levina from NYU. And this was a field study, meaning Sarah went into a hospital, one of the leading hospitals, to look at the use of AI for critical decision making, specifically cancer diagnosis. And she found in very similar types of cancer across different departments, different patterns of behavior, of engagement, as you said, with AI. So in some cases, in some departments, what we found was that the physicians did not engage with it, even though they were using it and people thought, you know, that this department is using AI, they were clicking it in that sense, that they were using it, but they were not engaging from a knowledge perspective. They didn't change their initial diagnosis or didn't integrate any knowledge from the AI output diagnosis, basically. They usually blindly ignored it, or in some cases, blindly accepted, but there was no engagement, no back and forth, no true kind of recombination of knowledge. Versus another department where we found that the physicians really wanted to engage. This was specifically for lung cancer diagnosis. And they wanted to try to understand how come the AI is showing an area, for instance, they missed. So what they did is we conceptualized it as AI interrogation practices. Because the AI is black box, it's very hard for them to really understand why the AI is recommending whatever it is. So they developed these interrogation practices, which are social technical interrogation practices that they do with other also technologies that they have at hand, such as CT, and they try to kind of backward engineer a little bit the logic of why did it see a nodule here when I'm not seeing, should I, you know, embrace that and adopt this recommendation or not? So they go through this engaged process and they integrate the knowledge claims from the AI. And we found this process really interesting. Also, the hospital managers found it very interesting since they were not aware of what's happening in the field of how it's used. So I warmly recommend in general to try to study AI in action, in use, in enactment, not just kind of theoretically or not based on the fact that the vendor has sold it and that means everyone is using it. But because experts have their way of thinking about when and why and whether they want to use those tools.
And I think also the notion that explainable AI may be easier for practitioners to engage in. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. But also, I think a hint for vendors who are producing these AI systems, as you said, if you just build the AI system and walk away, maybe you're not, it's the people who are working to continuously improve the AI, maybe some engagement between them and the users. And this gets us to, this topic of open innovation. I know you're also working on an open innovation with users. So could you tell us a little bit about maybe open innovation with users and how your research connects there as well?
It's a great connection between the AI and kind of user-based innovation. So AI systems today are built in a very closed way. The designers maybe come for a day to study the expert's work. They go back to their offices, they design a tool, they do the validation studies, of course, with the hospital, and we followed few of those. But there is no, I would say, not a lot of learning and open way of designing it or co-creation or anything along that lines. They kind of, assume that this will work for the experts. Maybe they come a month or two later, but that's it. They hardly are seen afterwards in the field. They don't have a way of integrating all the feedback that they could have had. And it's very important, especially in non-explainable kind of a black box AI, but even in explainable, because explainability is there is a continuum. It's not clear, right? The logic of the AI and its explainability is not necessarily the logic of the experts and how they think. So there needs to be a back and forth. There needs to be some openness in the way AI is designed if we really wanted to augment experts. Otherwise, it's not really augmenting them. It's either automating them completely if you just want to use the AI, or it's useless. We're spending money, attention, resource, and experts are not touching it. And it's become either a relic or a problem, because the new generation also of experts, I'm very concerned about how will they learn the profession. If we have the ability to augment them and we are not. So how should we train? How should they learn? Managers, how should they learn to use AI in an engaged way? And all type of different experts, right? Scientists, engineers, managers, HR professionals, finance professionals are now using it, and also in public services. So we have all these different types of experts that were trained for years to build their knowledge in specific ways, which does not necessarily speak to the way AI is built. And we need to think, I would say, more about this engagement, to have this engaged augmentation.
Absolutely. And so, Hila, the last question I have on this short introductory interview is, as you know, we have a Future of Expertise focus coming up for our next ISSIP Discovery Summit, which is very exciting. And could you share with us just a little bit of your thoughts on the future of expertise?
Definitely. So I think it's a fascinating topic. A lot of my research looks into it, and I'm personally fascinated by it. So one of my big studies were with NASA life scientists and the scientists and engineers there. It was a 3-year study where I saw how their way of thinking about themselves changes as they were trying to open up their innovation processes and use crowdsourcing platforms. And I think this is something we will see, that need to rethink who we are as professionals. So from an academic kind of perspective, we call it a professional identity work. It's actually to work on how do we define ourselves and to redefine ourselves. So what I found in that study is that ability to zoom out of the way you do things and not to define yourself by that, right? So we often get caught up by the how of what we do, and we think that this is who we are. We define ourselves by what we do. But if we zoom out of it from the how for a second and think about the bigger why, and why are we doing what we think we're doing? What do we really want to achieve as a profession, as individuals, as an organization? Then we have more of that flexibility to redefine ourselves and then redefine our work processes and then integrate new technologies, new ways of working. So that's what I found. I've seen that those that have really went through this zooming out and kind of refocusing their identity afterwards, really changed their way they're working and themselves, and enhanced their capabilities through crowdsourcing instead of being threatened by it and kind of not protecting kind of their work and themselves.
Yes, and I'm sure redefining the identity at a more responsible and ethical level is going to be increasingly important. So fantastic. Hila, thanks so much for just sharing a few minutes with us in the ISSIP community, and we'll definitely be circling back to learn more about your research and putting some links in our ISSIP newsletter to some of it as well. So thank you so much, Hila. Bye for now.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.